So with that, let us begin. So we have a lot to do today. Emeretz Hashem, we are picking up. Today's daf is Mem Daled 44. We are picking. Sorry, 1 second. But we are picking up Emeretz Hashem on Mem Gimel Amud Beis. We are picking up Emeretz Hashem on 43b, and we are picking up Belukma. It's about 20 lines up from 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, about 27 lines up from the bottom of us. So remember again, we're speaking about specifically the exemption, or I should say the ability to go back from war for the exemption of a kerem, of a vineyard. So the Gemara says, I'm sorry. So the Gemara says, why don't you set it up as dealing with a vineyard that belongs to two partners? The high hadar day, high hadar day. Each partner could return for the part of the vineyard which belongs to him. This teaches us. This teaches us, we'll say, that a jointly owned vineyard is not a license to return from war. Interesting. So why is it any different than the case of 5 brothers, right? Where one of the brothers dies, and now again, each of them technically has a yibum obligation, and that yibum obligation allows them to return from the front. In the case of yibum, every man has a connection to that woman, right? Every surviving brother has a connection to that sister-in-law. But in the case of the jointly owned karen, the jointly owned vineyard, neither party could claim that it is his vineyard in totality. What are we talking about? What's the case? We're talking about a situation where someone grafted a tree together. Yarek literally means a vegetable. In this case, ultimately, again, it means an herb. So the Gemara says as follows: V'haitanu tisanya mavrek ilan biyarek. If a person grafts a tree with an herb, Rabbi Shmuel says that it's mutar. Mishra Yehuda ben Gamda ish kfar Akko v'cham osrim. Ultimately, v'cham aser. Kas Rav Dimi Amar Yochanan. Hamani, whose opinion is this? Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Lo Amar Eliezer ben Yaakov Hasam Karen Kimashmo. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is of the opinion that also when it comes ultimately again to the exemption from war, he understands kerem, vineyard, in a literal sense. Hachanami nata kamashmo. So too over here he understands nata, and against for the prohibition as a literal statement as well. Notea in mavrich umarkivlo. It's dafka only if one plants, but if one layers or one grafts, that is not a reason to be exempted from war. Kesrav Dimi Yaakov, Mishra Bilaz ben Yaakov, Yolda Pechusa Mitefa Chayeves Ba'arla. So we'll say we're just jumping around a little bit over here. If you have a Yolda is a small sapling. Pechusa Mitefach. So we'll say less than a tefach tall. Look at Rashi. Pechusa Mitefach. She shafal koma. It's very short. Velo tigba li olam atefach. And I'm talking about over here where the growth is never going to exceed a tefach in height. In such a situation like that, Rabbi say, it is chayeves and arla kol shna seha. Essentially, it never leaves the status of arla. Why doesn't it leave the status of arla? The mischazia kibas shasa. Since it always has the appearance of a 1-year-old growth, the concern is that if we allow you to go ahead and eat it, what's going to happen? People are going to erroneously assume that one is permitted to consume arla. And that's only if you have like the basic, we'll call it the basic format of a vineyard, which is, or of an orchard, which is two, and one coming out on the bottom. Avakule kerem, but if you have an entire vineyard, so to speak, that looks like this, kala isle. It has a kol, right? People know that this is just a vineyard that has stunted growth and not a first-year growth. Mace, tofes, arba amos, the kriyashma. We'll say a mace, if you have a corpse, literally translated, it grabs the arba amos around it for kriyashma. We'll say what that means is, not only can you not say kriyashma in direct proximity of the mace, but you can't say Kriya Shema within the Dalit Amos of the mace. We've been introduced to this concept before. D'chsiv loig larash cherev osehu. So literally it means he who goes ahead and disparages the poor. Right? Ultimately, again, is a degradation to the one who created him. So the idea, we've seen this before in Maseches Brachos. The idea over here is we don't perform mitzvos in close proximity of the dead. Why? Because the dead don't have the ability to perform mitzvos. So it's considered to be an act of disrespect. So the Gemara says over here that when it comes to not saying Kriya Shema in the presence of the mace doesn't literally mean just right in front of the mace, but rather the presence of the mace even means within Dalit Amos of the mace. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shum, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Choragda hagdela ben ha'achin, asurin linose la'achin, t'mischazi kiach sayu. Very interesting. A stepsister. I would say, technically speaking, a person could marry his stepsister, right? They're not related. So the Gemara says, however, a stepsister who grows up amongst the brothers, one cannot go ahead and marry her. Why? Because she looks like a sister. In other words, just the optics of it, because she grew up amongst two brothers, it looks like a sister. To which the Gemara says, Velohi kala islay. So the Gemara says, no, it's actually not a problem. It's not a problem because there's a call. In other words, I will say, people know who real siblings are versus step siblings. So because people know, even if technically speaking, she grew up in the house, Halacha L'maaseh, the Gemara says, she can still marry one of the quote-unquote brothers. Of course, it's not really her brother, right? But rather, she can marry one of her step-brothers. Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, leket shichan peah, sha'asan begoren. This is actually a very interesting halacha. In general, leket, shichacha, and peah, right, are portions left for the poor. Technically speaking, anything that is left for the poor is tax exempt. It's tax exempt. Meaning what? If I'm a poor person, chas v'shalom, and I go ahead and I collect leket, shichacha, and peah, I don't have to give trumas and maasros from that. Right? There's no obligation like that. However, if you went ahead and sha'asan begoren, and I will say, if halacha l'maisa, I went ahead and I piled them together. Now, if you make a pile of leket, shichacha, and peah, then what I will say? See, remember, making a pile of something already has a much more, it appears as if one is harvesting. Well, if you're doing that, then hukva l'maiser. Then you'd indeed have to take trumas and maasros from it. Now I will say, the common denominator amongst all things that we're talking about over here are the optics of it. So the idea over here is if you took leket, shichacha, and peah, it's not a din in the volume of it. It's a din in the fact that now you went ahead and you piled it, which makes it look like a normative harvest. Then you're going to be chayiv in trumas and maasros. Amar ula, lo amar ala b'sadeh. This is only true if you're piling it in the sadeh, in the field. Aval be'ir, but if you're doing this in the city, kala islay l'milsa. People know, but I guess in the city because people dwell a little bit closer together. But if you look at Rashi says hukva l'maiser, midrabanan. Since you're piling it, it looks like you may have grown this stuff. And since you've grown it, right, it's your produce, and therefore halacha l'maiser, midrabanan, it'll be chayv in maiser. Now the Gemara qualifies this. This is only in the field. Because people in the field don't necessarily know what's going on. In the city, where people, I guess, are probably also going ahead and living closer together, and people see that I didn't grow it, but rather, again, I'm bringing it into my home, there would be no obligation to go ahead and tithe it. Incredible. So the Gemara says as follows. So what's an interesting case? If you have, literally, again, a growth that is less than a tefach, this is talking about now kloi hakerem, right? Remember, again, the forbidden mixture between wheat and vines, right? Wheat and grapes. So what happens if you have a yolda pechusa mitefach? You have a vine that is less than a tefach. It does not go ahead and create a problem for seeds planted nearby. Rashi says, mishum kloi hakerem d'chsiv bahu tiktash hamaleya hazera v'nearly the kasavar the kedamrina meminachos kanvus v'luf asra Torah sharzram medabananinu obichi hakerem lo gazra abanam sharzram. We'll say, since the growth is so stunted, essentially again Chazal were not gozer kloi hakerem in this type of situation. But that's only true. V'hani mili shtayim kineged shtayim v'achas yotzei zanav, where you have a case of, say, two vines, and one coming out on the bottom. That's like the minimum amount that represents a substantive growth. Aval kule kerem, but if you have an entire kerem like this, an entire vineyard, makdish. Indeed, it would become a problem of klaya kerem. I just want to point out the common denominator of what you said. We wonder what this is so random. It's just the same author. It's the same Tana. It's Rabbi Yitzchak near Rabbi Yochanan near Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Next case, top of Memdalit. Mace, Tofes Arba Amos Latuma. So we'll say, so before we spoke about Mace, Tofes Arba Amos the Kriya Shema, that when you have a corpse, we'll say top of 44a, Memdalit Medalf. When you have a corpse, ultimately, again, that corpse, you cannot recite Kriya Shema within Dalet Amos of that corpse. Why? Because the corpse itself, so to speak, seizes the Dalet Amos around it. So, Mem Dalet Medalf, Mace, Tofes Arba Amos Latuma. We'll say it's not just that, but a mace also, so to speak, takes over the Dalet Amos around it for Tumah purposes. What does this mean? Tap Rashi on Mem Dalet Amadalet, writes Rashi, Chachamim Gazru, Sheyehei HaMace Mitame Kol HaNichnas Ba'arba Amosov, Kedei Shelo Yargilu Ochlei Taros Likarivlo, Ve'esaver Shelo He'el Ve'eshlachos Shema Yivshot Yadav Yavadavidaitis. So we'll say, what's the concern over here? Technically speaking, the only time that a mace can base tumah is when if you touch it or if you have tumas ohel, you hover over it. Chazal came along, the rabbis came along and said, even if you are within Dalet Amos of a mace, you become tamei. Now they did this in order to go ahead and essentially add a protective barrier. What were they concerned about? That a person is going to be eating taras, and he's not going to realize, but he's in close proximity of the mace. And I will say, remember again, how can you contract tumas ohel? You lean over. So just, person can be in close proximity to the mace, accidentally lean over the grave, and suddenly again, he's tamei tumas mace. So therefore, essentially, in order to create just a protective barrier, in order to go ahead and ensure that people don't inadvertently contract tumas mace, Chazal said, you can't get within Dalet Amos of a mace. Can't get. I would say, by the way, of course, the metaphor is such a beautiful idea in general in life, right? If I have a very narrow line between right and wrong, between tamei and tahor, what's going to happen? You're going to contract tumah. And I don't mean halachic tumah. I mean like life tumah. Right? If I'm constantly straddling the line between right and wrong, then by definition I'm going to find myself on the wrong side of that. So much of success in life is all about creating protective barriers, especially in the areas that I know in which I am weak, right? All of us have our weak spots. So dafka in those weak spots, dafka in those areas in which I struggle most is where I need my protective barriers most. I have to identify again, where do I struggle? What's the Achilles heel? And how could I say, not just I'm not going to do it, but what are the protective barriers, the layers that I can place between myself and that hate to ensure that I'm not going to transgress? Chazal added Dalet Amos between myself and the corpse to make sure that I'm not going to become tamei. In life, it's going to sound strange, but we all have our corpse. Right? We all have that tumah. That is our greatest source of weakness. Make sure to put Dalet Amos between yourself and that mace. Incredible. The Tanatuna, we learned, Chatzra HaKeber ha'omi b'soch hatar. Interesting, we'll say, what happens if there is a Chatzra HaKeber? Now we'll say, look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says over here, Ta Chatzra HaKeber, Shelefnei ha'ma'ara kida amar b'seder binyan akvaras b'Basra, Shosin ma'aros kidolos shel sheish, v'chofer b'kos. That's what I'll say. They used to have like catacombs, like burial chambers. And in front of the burial chamber, there was a chutzar, a courtyard that led you into the burial chamber. So chutzar, the Gemara says, so chutzar HaKeber ha'omi b'soch hatar. If you stand in the chutzar, in the courtyard of the keber, you're tar. V'hushiu ba'arba amos re'beisham. Beisham says that's assuming that there's Dalet Amos in that keber. In that chutzar. If there's Dalet Amos in that chutzar, ultimately, again, you are going to go ahead and be tar. Now, we'll say, now what's the logic? Rashi says over here, ha'omi b'socho tar, komakum shu omid batar, t'chivan d'ma'ara chaluka heimenu u'mechitzoseni karos, lo gozra abanon, b'meisim shebesoch, shit v'su Dalet Amos, s'vivo sel. Supposed to listen to this. The logic behind it is since the catacomb itself, the actual area where the graves are, is separate and distinct, with its own mechitzas, with its own wall, the chutzner is viewed as a separate area. So because the chutzner is viewed as a separate area, if you stand there, you are tahar. Now, Beis Shammai says that's all provided that Allah Chalamaisa the chutzner has dalar amas. Because if the chutzner has dalar amas, then what? It's considered to be its own distinct area as well. So Beis Hillel says not dalar amas for tfachim. But essentially, what Rose said, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are agreeing in what? They're agreeing that if you stand in the chutzner, you're not tamei, as long as the chutzner is considered to be a chashiv, right, halachically important area on its own. So now the machlokas is what makes an area defined and important on its own. Beis Shammai says it's got to have an area of dalar amas. Beis Hillel says all it needs is an area of dalar tfachim. Fine. So the Gemara says, when is this true? Right? When is this so? Right? The Gemara says, this is when the entranceway to the catacomb below is above. Now we'll say, now what does that mean? Look at Rashi. Shin kinisas madron b'malos minatzad ela kishiyardin la kovtzin la ukishaolim misocha metapes va'ola. So I'll say, interesting enough, there are two ways apparently that you used to enter into these subterranean catacombs. One was essentially there'd be just like a hole in the ground, and you would lower yourself in and climb out. The other was stairs that would go down from the side. So the Gemara says, so ultimately again, the Gemara says, Medar Murim, so Beis Hillel says, when is this so? When ultimately again, Shepischam Lamalo, when the entrance to the catacomb is from the top just going down. Aval Pischam in Atzad, but ultimately again, if there's an entranceway to the side, meaning stairs that lead you down, Divrei Hakol, everyone agrees, Arba Amos, that you would need at least an area of 4 Amos. In other words, in the chutzner, in order for the chutzner to be considered its own separate and distinct area. To which the Gemara says, I don't understand, Klape Laya, Adarabba, I would say just the opposite. Minat Sad, when the entranceway to the catacomb is on the side, so I'll say on the side means it's a slope, there are stairs leading down into the subterranean catacomb. Minat Sad, so midrad vinafik. So I'll say, here's the difference. When it's on the side, clearly because it's stairs leading down, that means the chutzner is distinct from the graves, right? Because think about this. You have the chutzner, and then what? You're taking stairs into the catacomb, which tells you that where is the catacomb? In a separate area from the chutzner. So it makes much more sense to say in that situation there's not a problem of tumah. However, again, milamala, if literally the entranceway to the catacomb is just like a hole in the ground and you're just going in, what does that mean? The chutzner is situated right on top of the catacomb. That should be a problem of tumah. But milamala efshad lo mayel el madramur. When is this so? Shepischam in atzad. So I'll say, when is this so? Ultimately, again, that as long as the chutzner has a certain requisite area, you're not going to contract tumah. That's when the entranceway to the catacomb is on the side. But everyone agrees that if the entranceway is on top, i.e. it's just a hole and you descend down, arba amos, that the chutzner must have a minimum amount of 4 amos. So as we'll say, even Beis Hillel, who says that the chutzner only needs to be 4 tfachim in order for the person standing there not to contract tumah, that's only in a situation where halacha l'maaseh the entranceway to the catacomb is on the side, and therefore you could stand on the chutzner or in the chutzner without standing on top of the graves. But if the entranceway is just straight down, right, then even Beis Hillel would agree that the chutzner has to be at least daled amos in order for you not to contract tumah. Incredible. So the Gemara says, "V'hani mili chutzner kever demesaima mechitzasa." I would say, but even this is so. Even all of this is only with a chutzner, with a defined kever. Ava meis ba'ama, but just stam a meis, or just stam you have a body that's buried somewhere, or even a body that's not buried somewhere. Ba'asli says, Ava meis ba'ama, tafis. But a mace ultimately, again, by itself, halacha l'maisa, will always seize the daled amas around it. And I will say that is indeed how we paskin, both for Kriyas Shema as well as for Tumah. That if you have a body, whether that body is buried or unburied, that body exerts its influence, so to speak, within the Dalet Amos around. So you would not be permitted to say Kriyas Shema within Dalet Amos of a mace, and ultimately, again, there would be rabbinic tumah within Dalet Amos of a mace as well. Okay, incredible. We'll say back to our sugya. Mia ish asher aras isha. So must remember again, one of the exemptions was a man who went ahead and did erisin, but didn't get to nisuin. Right, he didn't live with his wife. So what's the halacha? He goes back. So it's on Rabbanon aras. So asher aras. So we'll say this is true whether he had erisin with a basula or erisin with an almana, or for that matter, even again shomer savam, he's going to marry his widowed sister-in-law. And we'll say, we just mentioned this before, even if you have 5 brothers, right, and one of them chas v'shalom died in war, kulan chosr, they all go back. What's the reason they all go back? Because they're all considered to be someone, so to speak, who has erisin, right, for the shomeres yavam. So the Gemara says, right, kulan chosr, lo lokach. So we'll say, so remember again, the pasuk is, just the pasuk the Gemara is quoting is, Mia ish asher aras isha v'lo likacha. Who is the man who betrothed the woman, but lo likacha, did not take her, right? He did not do nisuin, he didn't live with her. So the Gemara just points out, it doesn't say lo lakach, but rather it says lo likacha. He did not take her. So prat li almana lekohen gadol, grusha v'chalutza lekohen hedyot, mamzeres unesina li Yisrael basra mamzerasan. So what is this? Why does the Torah employ this lashon? Lo likacha means he did not yet do nisuin with her, and nisuin with her would be legal nisuin. What does this come to exclude? This comes to exclude, right, a kohen gadol who did kiddushin with an almana, or a regular kohen who did kiddush with a grusha v'chalutza, or a mamzeres, or a nesina Yisrael. So we'll say it comes to exclude in a legal marriage. To which the Gemara says, "Limud lo Rabbi Yossi Aglili." So I'll say apparently this is not just Rabbi Yossi Aglili. It's in the conversation we had yesterday. What does Rabbi Yossi Aglili say? Rabbi Yossi Aglili ha'amar hayore v'rach halevav zeha misar me'aver shadar. We're going to see if this is our next Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi Aglili is the opinion who says that when the Torah says if you're afraid of what? Afraid of averus. So I'll say according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, in these cases you should be able to go back. So let's just play this out. In other words, we just said when the pasuk says asher lekacha, what the Torah is saying is, you only go back for a wife who you are permitted to marry. But if you're not permitted to marry the wife, you don't go back. So the Gemara says, this stands in contradiction to Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Because Rabbi Yossi Aglili is one who says that if you are scared about your averos, you can go back from war. Now we'll say, this is a situation of an avera. A kohen gadol who did kiddushin with an almana, or a kohen hedyot who did kiddush with a grusha or a chalutza, this is an avera. They should be able to go back. Yet the Gemara says, no, they can't go back for such a situation like this. So obviously it doesn't reflect the view of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, to which the Gemara says, no. Avera tema Rabbi Yossi Aglili kiderabba. Damarabba, the olam eno chayiv ad sheyival. So we'll say, this is fascinating. Rabba holds that in cases of a legal marriage, it's fascinating. When do you transgress, right, the performance of an illegal marriage or engaging in a legal marriage? Only after relations. Interesting. So in other words, the act of kiddushin in an illegal marriage is not the avera. It's the act of relations, the act of biyah. The Gemara says, Dam Rabba li olam eno chayiv ad sheyival. Ma tam lo yikach. Why does the Torah say ultimately you can't take this woman? Mishum lo yichalal. Ultimately, again, because it profanes the offspring. Therefore, mishum hachi eno loka ad sheyival. Since the whole issue with an illegal marriage is what? Profanation of offspring. That is a brand new word, right? Profanation, I think, is a brand new word. Profaning offspring, right? Called profanation, right? So the Maisa, therefore, the Isser is only when there's bia. So I said it's actually quite fascinating. So let's play this out. So now you have, right, the soldiers are ready for war. You have a Kohen who is there, and this Kohen betrothed did kiddushin with a grusha, a divorcee, illegal. So now the Gemara is saying he can't go back on grounds of marriage, right? Why can't he go back for on grounds of marriage? Why not? Because the only time you're allowed to go back for grounds of marriage is for a legal marriage. Says the Gemara, but he should be able to go back because of Avera. We're going this way. Yosef Lili says if he's afraid of his Avera, he should be able to go back because of an Avera. To which the Gemara says, Technically, no. He hasn't committed an Avera yet. Like Rabbi says, why? When is the Avera for an illegal marriage committed? When it's consummated. Bia, relations. It's interesting. The act of Kiddushin itself is not the Avera. It's the act of consummation of the marriage relations. Bia, that's the Avera. Quite incredible. Tan Rabbanan. Let's analyze. Tan Rabbanan. We'll say we are now on Memdal and Medalef. Rashi, remember, again, is on both sides of this page. So if you look at Rashi on the left-hand column, where you see the big Masnisin, there, that Rashi, we are right across from there in the Gemara. Tan Rabbanan. So let's analyze. Well, the Gemara teaches us all. Tan Rabbanan. Asher Bana, Asher Nata, Asher Aras. So we'll say this is an incredible Gemara. The Gemara says as follows. When you look at the list of exemptions, right? What's the order of the exemptions? Who is the person who built a home? Who is the person who planted a vineyard? Who is the person who got married? So we'll say these are the list of exemptions. So the Gemara says, Limda Torah derech haretz. I will say, the Torah could have employed any order. It's interesting that the order is, who is the guy who built a house? Who is the guy who planted a vineyard? Who is the guy who married a woman? So what do you see from here? Lim the Torah derech eretz sheyivna adam bayis v'yita kerem v'achar kach yisa isha. An interesting order, right? What's the proper order for life? First, a person should go ahead and build a house, right? Have a place to live. Then a person should plant a vineyard, have a parnasa, and then after you have a house and after you have a parnasa, then you should get married. Okay. V'ashlam arba chachmaso. Sotah Shlomo said, Hachin b'chutz melachtecha. V'atita b'sadalach achar ubanisa b'sechas. So what's here? I was quoting from the pasuk in Mishlei. So literally translated means hachin b'chutz melachtecha. Prepare your parnasa, your livelihood on the outside. V'atita b'sada. Prepare yourself or busy yourself with your field. Achar ubanisa b'sechas. Then after all of that, you will build your home. The Gemara says, hachin b'chutz melachtecha. Prepare your malacha. That's bayis. That refers to the building of a home. Va'atata b'sadalach, and busy yourself in the field. Zekerem, that refers to your vineyard, i.e. your parnasa. Ubanisa beischa, build your home. Zoisha, that refers to wife. So we'll say, so to point out, it's fascinating. In other words, okay, so the truth is, it's kind of intuitive. In other words, right, have a place to live, make money, and then get married. That way you can support your wife. Okay? Let's say, on a deeper level, what it also means is as follows. In a marriage, we all know this, right? We all know this, that sometimes one of the greatest stressors are finances. Right? Nothing could destroy shalom bayis like stress over finances. So I'll say, what the Gemara is also saying is, sometimes if a person enters into marriage with a financial plan, then ultimately, again, that gives them a better probability, ultimately, of going ahead and building proper shalom bayis. Again, let's say it is interesting, by the way, how some of these things which seemed so obvious for Chazal are so foreign to us now, which is just again, it's just society. It's just societally how things shift in such fascinating ways. And okay, good. Let's go weiter. So Gemara says, Davar Acher, Hachin b'chutz melachtecha. Ultimately, again, prepare your malacha on the outside. What does this mean? Zem mikra. This refers to Chumash. Va'atata b'sadalach, and busy yourself in the field. Zem Mishnah. So the Gemara says, Achar ubanisa b'sech. Then afterwards, build your home. Ze Gemara. So we'll say another homiletic interpretation. First learn Chumash, then learn Mishnah, and then learn Gemara. Davar Acher, Hachin b'chutz melachtecha. Go ahead and literally prepare, right? Prepare on the outside your work. Zeh mikra u'mishnah. That refers to Chumash and Mishnah. Va'atata b'sada lecha. That refers to Gemara. Achar ubanisa b'secha. Then build your home. Elu maisim tovim. Beautiful. That refers to good deeds. In other words, we'll say it's such a beautiful idea, right? Your malacha, right? Begin with your malacha, your work. That's mikra. That's Chumash and Mishnah. Plow your field. Right, that's ultimately Gemara, and build your home. Rabbi said that's ma'asim tovim, that's good deeds. See, learning is not an ends. Learning is a means to engaging in beautiful, dynamic activity. That's called the building of your home. So do your work, plow your field, that's all of your Torah. And then build your home, that's your Ma'asim Tovim. That's your good deeds. So beautiful. Rabbi Eliezer ben Moshe Omer, Hachin b'chutz malachtecha, prepare your malacha on the outside. Zem mikra mishnah ugimara. Interesting. That's Torah. Chumash mishnah gemara. Va'atata b'sada lecha. That refers ultimately again to your Ma'asim Tovim, good deeds. Acha b'nisa v'secha. Then go ahead and build your home. Drosh v'kabel schar. So what do you mean drosh v'kabel schar? That means look for even deeper meaning in your learning. Right? So also what that means is actually beautiful. What's the pshat in this last one? So I'll say in this last one, you have hachem b'chutz malachtecha, right? Prepare your work on the outside. That refers to Torah. Mikra, Mishnah, Gemara. Atada b'sadeh, plow your field. That's Ma'asim Tovim. And then build your home. Look for deeper meaning in your learning. In other words, Rabbi saying, what is it saying? Always go for more. In other words, in the previous drasha, where kind of does it end? It ends at Ma'asim Tovim, right? You have Mikra, Mishnah, Gemara, learn your Torah, allow your Torah to manifest itself in dynamic life activity, and that's the finish line. In this last drasha, I was saying, there's never a finish line. What do? You learn your Torah, you use your Torah to create Ma'asim Tovim, and after you've learned Torah and done Ma'asim Tovim, then what? Drosh v'kabel schar. Look for deeper meaning in your Torah as well. Or in other words, you're never done. You're never done. I will say, people often ask, right, what's the finish line? Simple answer is, there is no finish line. Now, there's a time in which you're finished running the race, right? When do you finish running the race? That's after 120. You're finished running the race. But at no point in time in life do you ever cross the finish line. Now, again, you may, I'll say, it's like, I guess the best mashal is like the car races, right? Like the what do they call the car? Like NASCAR, right? Like NASCAR, right? In other words, you have laps, right? So in other words, in life, you finish like laps, right? Okay, Mazel Tov, you finish lap number 1. You finish that. In other words, there are increments of completion, but in terms of when you finish the race is never finished, even after 120. Usually the race isn't finished. It's just someone stopped you in the race, right? Okay, you're done. You're done with the laps. Did I finish everything? I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. But I will say, such an incredible yesod. So after you do your mikra, your mishnah, your gemara, after you do your Ma'asim Tovim, you might have thought, I finished? No, drosh v'kabel schar. Drosh v'kabel schar means, what's next? What's more? How can you look for something deeper? How can you look for something greater? How can you look for something more expansive? Drosh v'kabel schar represents the ongoing journey in spiritual development. Incredible. So we'll say these are the people who do not return for more. So we'll say, remember again, then the Gemara gave examples, ultimately again, for example, of buildings, structures that are not domicile worthy, and therefore again, one can't return from the war for them. One of the examples we'll say is someone who knocks down a home and rebuilds the exact house. You don't return back for war from that. The Gemara says, however, Tana im hosif bo dimos echad choser. If you add on one row of bricks, right, or one row of stones, either in height or in width. In other words, if you knock down your house and you rebuild the same structure, but you make a wall a little taller, a wall a little thicker, that's called a new structure, and that would allow you to return for more. Rabbi Eliezer said, even if you build a brick home, a brick home in the Sharon region, you don't return back for more from that. Why not? We'll say first why line. Tana, because we spoke on this in Rashi already, because Lamais, again, the earth in the Sharon region was not good for making bricks. Right? It was not good for making bricks, and therefore, again, any structure you made from Sharonian bricks would crumble. They would have to rebuild their home twice every 7 years, once every 3.5 years. Shalamai said because of that, it wasn't really called domicile worthy, and therefore you cannot return for more from that. Ve'ilu shein zazim imkomon, banabayis chashchashach. So then remember again, third category are people who don't even leave their homes. So remember again, in category number 2, right, category number 1 is everyone who comes out to war. Category number 2 are the exemptions. In the case of the exemptions, the guy married a woman but did not yet live with her. Built a home, didn't live in it. Planted a vineyard, didn't yet partake of it. Everybody's going out to war, right? And at the border, when the Mashiach Muhammad gives his first speech and lists all of the exemptions, what do? they go home. And what do they do when they go home? What do? They support the war effort, right? With food, with drink, with roads, fine. Third category are people who do not even come out. Right? That's the guy who married a woman and he's in Shana Rishona, first year of marriage. Built a home, Shana Rishona. Partaking of a vineyard, Shana Rishona, first year. These guys, they don't even come out. Right? They don't even come out. They don't even report for duty. So TORAH Banan, Isha Chadasha, a new wife, Ainli Alech Isha Chadasha. Ainli Nabo say Isha Chadasha sounds like a basula. Right? Amana Grusha Minay. How do I know that if a man married a widow or a divorcee, the same halacha applies. If he's in Shana Rishona the first year, right, the first year of his marriage to a widow or to a divorcee, he doesn't have to go to war. Talmud Lomar, Isha Mikol Makom. Pasuk says Isha. Isha Chadasha. So why does the pasuk say a new wife? Misha Chadasha lo. It means a new wife for him. I was supposed to say, even though someone has been married before, she's a new wife for him. Yatsa Machzir Grushaso Shein Chadasha lo. This comes to exclude what case? Machzir Grushaso. A man remarries his divorcee. If you remarry your divorcee, that's not an excuse not to go to war. Both sides, again, Memdalad Amadalif, in the wide lines, third line in the wide lines, halfway through the line. Tanabana, Lo Yetze, but Savi doesn't go out to war. Yochel, but Savi, Lo Yetze, Val Yaspik, Mayim, Mazon, Vitakin, Adrachim. So I'll say, so again, remember, we're talking about these people who are in the midst of Shana Rishona, first year of marriage, first year of new house, first year of new vineyard. So the Torah says they don't go out to war. I might have thought they don't go out to war in the army, but they help the war effort at home, right? Talmud Lomar, v'lo ya'avor alav l'chol davar. No, he's not involved in anything. Yochal shanimar ba'af habone bayis v'lo chancho, nata keren v'lo chillo, ares ish v'lo lekacha. I might have thought, therefore, to apply this same halacha, we'll say, to a man who betrothed the woman, but didn't yet marry her, built a home, but didn't yet live in it, planted a vineyard, but didn't yet partake of it. Maybe these guys don't go out to war and don't help out in the war effort either. Talmud Lomar, Alav. Therefore, the pasuk is not only on this guy, the aforementioned guy. Alav yatamavir, aval atamavir alachirim. So we'll say it's only on this unique individual, right? These three individuals. Shana Rishona of marriage, Shana Rishona of new house, Shana Rishona of new vineyard. These are the guys who don't even come out at all. But everyone else goes out to war, is returned home because they have an exemption and supports the war effort from home. After the pasuk says don't place any responsibility on him, why does it say don't go out in war? To teach Rabbi say that if he does go out, ultimately again he's in violation of two prohibitions. So Rabbi say, so it turns out that halacha l'maisa, we pretty much have these three categories of people. We'll call it regular guys who go out to war. Right? Category number 2 are people who have a man who has betrothed the woman, right? Kiddushin, but no nisuin, hasn't lived with her. Built a home, hasn't lived in it. Planted a vineyard, hasn't partaken of it. These guys go out to war, right, up until the border, and then they're turned back. Then they go home. Now we'll say, once they go home, what do? They support the war effort from home. Third category is a guy who's in Shana Rishona, first year of marriage, first year of living in a new home, first year partaking of a new vineyard. These individuals, they don't go out. They stay put. They don't go out, and not only that, they have they don't have any obligations upon them. They do not even work to support the war effort at home. Fine. One more piece to this. Mishnah. Was it incredible? So we'll say, so the officers continued to go ahead and speak to the nation. And we'll say, what did they say? They said, Mia ish hayare v'rach alevav. Who is the person who is afraid and soft of heart? Go home. Okay, so we'll say, so now this is now another category of exemptions. If you are afraid or soft of heart. Rabbi Kiva says, so we'll say, what does it mean? Rabbi Kiva says, Hayare v'rach alevav kimashma'o she'eno yochol lama v'kishem mechama v'liros char shlufa. Rabbi Kiva says, you don't need to interpret this in any deeper way. What does it mean to be afraid? What does it mean to be afraid? He's afraid. We'll say again, he's unable to stand in battle and unable to see an unsheathed sword. Right? The guy is just, again, he's just afraid. He's afraid of war. Rabbi Yosef Alili Omer, no. Incredible. Rabbi Yosef Alili says no. What is he afraid of? He's afraid that he does not possess the requisite merit to be successful on the battlefield. He is afraid of the averos shebiyado. Right? He's afraid of the averos that he has. Right? Lefichach tilsalo atara is called ilu shachs with glon. So it's incredible. Rabbi Yosef Lili says, this is remember again, there's an order. Right? Rabbi Yosef, what's the order? First we talk about the exemptions for a guy who built a house, right? Who married a woman, built a house, planted a vineyard. Then we say if you're scared. What's the great part? When you go home, no one knows why you're going home. I mean, your buddies might know why you're going home. They're like, hey, you didn't just get married. You didn't build a house. You didn't plant a vineyard. Right? So I guess by process of elimination. So again, but stam, people are not going to know why it is that you're going home. That way you have cover. We'll say, you see from here, by the way, how important it is to go ahead and, right, protect a person's dignity. Right? How important it is just to protect a person's covet. Rabbi Yossi says, Amar lekoin gadol, grusha v'chalutz lekoin hedyot, mamzer sunesin liyisrael, bas Yisrael mamzer ulenasin. Harehu hayar v'rach alebav. So we'll say, Rabbi Yossi seems to be giving examples of averos. His examples are illegal marriages. He says, this is an example of someone who would be afraid because of the averos he possesses. The Gemara is going to ask, what exactly is the difference between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yossi Haglili? We'll discuss this. So that's the exemption. That's the exemption ultimately again for averos. So again, the Gemara says, so we'll say now that the children finished their whole drasha. So we'll say, so now the speaking part, right? The pre-war drashas are over. Now what happens? They would set up officers in the front of the nation and in the back of the nation. So what happens? So the Gemara says, Mamidin zikifin lifnehem v'acharehem v'achirim me'acharehem ukshilin shel barzel biyadein. So let's listen to this. They would go ahead and they would put strong officers in the front, and we're going to see the point of the strong officers in the front was that if soldiers fell, they would pick them back up, right? Literally and figuratively, literally pick them up and give them chizuk. Now they would also station officers on the back of the army. Why? Ukshilin shel barzel biyadein. They had iron clubs in their hands. And I will say, if somebody tried to run away from the army, the guys in the back would literally, again, club them in the feet, club them in the legs. I will say, so pretty intense. Why? The Gemara says, Amud Beis, Shetchilas, Nisa Nefila. Ultimately, I will say, why? Now, literally translated, it means the beginning of running away is downfall. We're going to see exactly what that phrase means. Shnei Amar, Nas Yisrael Lifnei Plishtim, V'gam Hagefa Gedola Haisa Ba'am. Ulalanu Omer, Vayanusu Anshe Yisrael Mipnei Plishtim, Vayiplu Chalalim. In other words, we're both saying, if the army begins to run away, that is the beginning of the defeat of the nation. So therefore, I both say it's incredible. In other words, you had an opportunity to leave. Just to be clear, right? Every soldier had an opportunity to leave. So that's why that last one, if you're afraid and you don't want to fight, we don't want you there. We absolutely do not want you there. Right? But Lamaisa, once you're there, you're there. And I will say, again, for the benefit of the army in totality, no deserters. You cannot run away. And if you try to run, we're essentially going to cut off your legs. That's essentially what happens, right? You're going to get clubbed in the legs, and that's it. Why? We'll say, this is an incredible. So you say to yourself, poor guy, he's scared, he's getting clubbed in the legs. We'll say, sometimes the needs of the collective outweigh the needs of the individual. I understand you're scared, but right now the army needs to win the battle. And if your buddies see you running away, it's going to be detrimental to the war effort. So if it means you're going to cut off your legs, right, club your legs, that's it. That's what we'll say. The needs of the collective outweigh the needs of the individual. So the Gemara goes back to when is this so? We'll say now, when is what so? We'll say, when is it so that you have all of these exemptions from battle? Right? Whether it's the guy who went ahead and built the house, got married, built a vineyard, planted a vineyard, all this stuff. The Mochemes HaRishus. We'll say, this is incredible. This is all talking about optional wars. We'll talk about that in a moment. So the Gemara says, Aval Mochemes Mitzvah. We'll say, when it is an obligatory war, everyone goes to war. Hakol Yotzin. Afilu Chasan Mechedra Bekala Michupasa. Even the Chasan from his bridal canopy. Kind of, we'll say, the expression Kala Michupasa is not literal. Because again, in the Jewish army, women did not historically go out to war. So it's just an expression. It's an expression that everyone goes out to battle. But I will say, Maharsha says what it means is, Kala Michupasa means that the women would be involved in the war. They would be supporting the war effort, again, from a logistical perspective, but not actually fighting the battles. I'm Rabbi Yehuda, when is this so? B'melchamas mitzvah, b'melchamas chova, hakol yotzna, afilu chasen echadro, kal mechupasa. So Rabbi Yehuda uses a different lashon. He says, when is this so that there are exemptions? Ultimately, again, a melchamas mitzvah. But when it comes to an obligatory war, everyone goes out. So we'll discuss the difference in the Lashonos. Right? We'll see they're in fact saying the same thing, just using different phraseology. So I will say a really incredible and fascinating Mishnah. But just kind of going back, this concept of exemptions only applies to what we'll call optional wars. Optional wars. But Melchemes Mitzvah, which is an obligatory war, ultimately, again, everyone goes out. It doesn't matter. You marry, you have no differences, no exemptions from a chametz. So let's analyze. So we'll say, my ika ben Rabbi Yossi, my ika ben Rabbi Yossi. So let's remember again, going back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah was speaking about a person who is exempt from war because he's Zareh and Rach Levav. He's afraid. He's afraid. So the Gemara said, Rabbi Yossi said, what is he afraid of? He's afraid of his averos. Averos shebiyado. Then Rabbi Yossi said, for example, like a Kohen married to Grusha V'Chalutza. Kohen Gadol married to an Almana. You saw married, so we'll say, they seem to be saying the same thing. What's the disagreement? So we'll say, listen to this. Ika benayu avera d'Rabbanan. Wow. And we'll say, you know what they're arguing about? For example, an avera d'Rabbanan. And we'll say, what does that mean? See, if you notice, by the way, let's work backwards. Rabbi Yossi gave examples of what? Averos d'Oraisa. A Kohen Gadol marrying an Almana. Kohen Hedyot marrying Grusha V'Chalutza. Those are Averos d'Oraisa. According to Rabbi Yossi, the only type of Avera which would preclude you from going to war is an Avera d'Oraisa. According to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, even if you're worried about your Averos d'Rabbanan, you would not go out to war. Now, I just want to point out, you read this, and what do you think to yourself? This army probably didn't have a mezuman. Right? Let's say, I don't understand. Right? This is the criteria for going out to war? Yes. Who's scared of the Averos? I'm scared of my Averos, right? Forget my, I'm not even up to my Dirabanans, right? I'm still worried about my Da'oraisas. So who is going out to war? So I will say, look at the Lashon of the Mishnah. What does Rabbi Yosef say? He says, who is the person who is afraid? Min Averos Shebiyado. I will say, what does Shebiyado mean? What does Shebiyado mean? You're holding on to them. In other words, we're talking about a person. There's a very easy way for me to deal with my Averos. What is it called? Tshuva. And what does Tshuva do? Rabbi will say, Tshuva removes Averos. Averos Shebiyado means my problem is not that I've done Averos. We've all done Averos. The problem is Averos Shebiyado. Averos that I'm holding on to, that I'm still doing, that I have not done tshuva for. That's where the problem comes up. That's where I'm still holding on to it. It's Averos Shebiyado. Shebiyado says, you have Averos Shebiyado. I don't know. You got to really think about it. Is it a good idea for you to be part of the fighting army? Is it a good idea for you to go out to war or not? That you did Averos? All of us do Averos. But I will say, what's my goal? In the immediate aftermath of an Avera, what should I be doing? Tshuva. And I will say, by the way, tshuva on its most basic level is a cognitive, emotional process. I'm sorry that I did this. I should not have done it. I regret that I did it, and I'm going to be better going forward. Boom. That's tshuva. So if you've done your tshuva, you feel confident going out to battle. The challenge is with the guy who's living life with Averos Shebiyado. You're holding on to this stuff, and you're not rectifying it. I'm holding on to it, and I'm not going through the process of tshuva. So if I'm holding on to Averos Shebiyado, and not doing tshuva, I'm just holding on to those behaviors, it may be a good idea not to go out to war. I will say incredible. All that HaKadosh Baruch Hu asks is do tshuva. Right? Recognize what you've done, own it, have remorse for having done it, and pledge to do better in the future. That's it. If you do that, slate is wiped clean, you are ready to go. But Averos Shebiyado, you want to hold on to your sins. You're not willing to give them up. You're not willing to do tshuva. And Rabbi Yosef Lili says, turn around and go back home. So the Gemara says, come on, all the time. We'll say, what's an example? Whose opinion is reflected here? We'll say, get ready for this. Sach, bein tefillah l'tefillah. if you speak when putting on your tefillin, the person speaks between putting on their tefillin shal yad and their tefillin shal rosh, the hand tefillin and the head tefillin, avera hu biyado, this is an avera, the choser aleh me'archa mechama. Abba said this is the type of an avera that's what? Don't go to war. Wow. If you talk while putting on your tefillin, that is the type of avera for which you should not go out to battle. Kiman, Abba said, whose opinion is reflected there? That's Rabbi Yossi Lili. Because we'll say again, that would make sense, because according to Rabbi Yossi, you need like real averos da'oraisa. Rabbi Yossi Lili says, no, even averos d'Rabbanan are enough to allow you to go home. So Rabbi says, halacha l'maisa, if you speak between putting on tefillin shehad, tefillin shal rosh, ultimately, again, that's enough to go ahead and turn you around. We'll come back to that in just a moment. Tana. Once I finish the paragraph, I want to tell you something about that very quickly. So, man tanalu tan rabbanon, shama kol kronos v'ersia. We'll say a person heard the horns of the opposing army and he got scared. Hagafas trisin v'ersia. He heard the clanking of the shields. He got scared. Tzich tzuch v'charabos. Here's the clatter, right? The glitter of the swords. And ultimately, again, umayim shosesin lo al berkab. And literally, again, he soils himself. Right? He soils himself because he's so scared. Choser. Go back home. So Kiman, who's that like? Let me Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yosef. Both say it's Rabbi Akiva. Because Rabbi Akiva is the one who said that Yore and Rachal Lebav literally means what? A guy who's scared. To which the Gemara says, no. But half of Rabbi Yosef Modi. Even Rabbi Yosef would agree in that case that you should go home. Why? Mishum dichsivelo yamas as levav echav kilabavo. Even Rabbi Yosef says, well, say, if a guy is mamish scared, to the point that literally, again, he can't take the noise of the opposing army, he's soiling himself because he's so scared, even Rabbi Yosef Lili agrees, go home. Why? Because you are a detriment to the war effort, right? Remember, again, soldiers have to inspire confidence in one another, and this guy clearly does not do that. So I'll say, hi, the phrase Rabbi says shouldn't be because the beginning of fleeing is downfall. Rather, it should be what? The beginning of downfall is fleeing. To which the Gemara says, you're right. Rabbi say, by the way, is that not a profound statement? Right? The beginning of downfall is fleeing. But I will say it's not just true in war, but it's true in life as well. The beginning of life downfall is when you run away from your problems and challenges. It's so hard to confront sometimes the demons that we have. It's so hard to confront the skeletons in the closet. And it's hard to confront the life challenges we have. And it's so tempting to run. But just know, the Gemara says, Tchilas nefila nisa. The beginning of downfall, the beginning of defeat is ultimately running away. It's not just true in war, but ultimately true in life as well. So we'll say, so remember in the Machlokes in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yochanan, Rishus Tirabanon, Zoe Mitzvah Rabbi Yehuda. We'll say they're saying the same thing, just using different words. A Melchemes Rishus of Dirabanon, that's what Rabbi Yehuda calls a Melchemes Mitzvah. Mitzvah Dirabanon, the Melchemes Mitzvah of Dirabanon, Zoe Chov Rabbi Yehuda. That's called the obligatory word of Rabbi Yehuda. So we'll say, we'll give examples. Melchemes Yoshua Lichbosh Devia Kol Chova. Everyone agrees, for example, when Yoshua came into Eretz Yisrael and conquered the land, everyone agrees that's a Melchemes Mitzvah, or what we'll call an obligatory war. Right? Based David Rivkah, when David HaMelech wanted to expand the territorial borders of Eretz Yisrael, that's Rishus. Optional. Ki pligi. Both says fascinating. Where's the Machlokes? Lemi'ute ovdei kochavim telo leisi alayhu. I will say, here is the machlokes. What about a proactive offensive war to minimize surrounding enemies? Right? An offensive war to minimize enemies. So I will say, ultimately, what do you call that? Mar kari le mitzvah. One calls that a melchemes mitzvah, because again, these are enemies of Klal Yisrael. You're just proactively eliminating them. Umar kari rishus, and one calls it an optional war. Nafkamina lo'osik b'mitzvah shapata min ha'mitzvah. I'll say nafkamina would be, right, if you're engaged in this type of battle, are you pata from other mitzvahs? So I'll say, so bottom line for our purpose is, halacha l'maisa, the exemptions that we're talking about are all in what we'll call a melchemes rishus. That's the lexicon we use. That's the verbiage we use. Melchemes rishus. Melchemes rishus means it's a war that is waged with the permission of Beis Din of the Sanhedrin, but it's not a war commanded by God. David HaMelech wants to expand the territorial borders of Eretz Yisrael. That's fine, right? That's called a melchemes rishus. That's where all the exemptions sit in. But melchemes mitzvah, like a war against Amalek, a war to conquer Eretz Yisrael, that everyone goes to battle. We'll say just very quickly, in the negative 1 minute that we have, we'll say, what's the pshat? What's the pshat with the fact that talking between Tefillin Shad and Tefillin Shalosh ultimately is a reason to go back from battle? What's the pshat with that? So Rabbi Soloveitchik explains this idea very beautifully. You see, tefillin, the beauty of tefillin is it's the connection between thought and action. I will say many times in life, we have beautiful ideas, goals, aspirations, hashkafas. What's the problem? They live in my head, but they don't materialize in my actions. So I'll say the goal of tefillin is a linkage between thought and action. I have to live what I believe. It's not enough in life to have beliefs. You have to actually live those beliefs. You believe in something, you have certain hashkafas, you have certain ideals. Those have to find expression in the way you live your life. What's the problem with a guy who speaks between Tefillin Shayah and Tefillin Shalosh? There's a disconnect between what he believes and how he lives. A disconnect between his Shalyad and his Shalosh. I have my beliefs, but my beliefs are not manifest in the way that I live. Rosh Baruch Hu says, there's a disconnect between the way you think and the way you live. Better not to go out to battle. Better for you to stay home. On the front, in the war, in the battle, we need people who are consistent, who live their ideals, who live their beliefs, and whose very ideals and beliefs are manifest in the way that they practice, in the way that they live each and every day. That's a soldier. That's a person who's going to be successful in the battlefield, and that's ultimately, again, the person we need on the front lines. So we'll say, Hadram Lach Mashuach Melchama, Shkoyach.